Hello, and welcome to today's Safety and Health webcast, Knowledge is Power, the Visual Benefits of 5S Plus, sponsored by Brady. My name is Kyle Morrison. I'm the Senior Associate Editor with Safety and Health magazine, and I'll be moderating today's session. Thank you for joining us. We'll start the presentation in a few minutes, but first I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. The views of the speakers and their organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health magazine. Mention of any commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the council or the magazine endorse them. At the end of today's webcast, we'll have a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply type it in the text box located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, then click the Submit Question button. You can feel free to ask your question at any point during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the Q&A session to begin to ask your question. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but due to the number of participants today, we may not get to all of the questions during our live presentation. However, all unanswered questions will be forwarded on to today's speakers. For basic troubleshooting information, please click the Help button located on your screen. At the end of the webcast, you'll be asked to complete an evaluation survey, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after the presentation. This webcast will be archived for 3 months, so you can access it after today's live presentation. Within about a day, just return to the same URL to access the webcast. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to begin. We have 2 speakers with us today. Chris Clark has 25 years of operational management experience at Brady, where he has led lean site transformations, managed plants, and facilitated production moves. Lori Eschbacher is Brady's global product manager for safety and facility identification printing systems and their consumables, and has more than 25 years of experience with these systems. Lori?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. In this session, we're going to go beyond the basics of 5S. A lot of you already are familiar with that, but instead, we're going to focus on the importance of a 5S program to make your facility safer, more efficient, and just more productive. We're also going to spend some time showing examples of how incorporating visuals, and by that we're talking about different types of signs or labels, can help reinforce your 5S program. Knowledge is power. Workplace visuals used to provide and enhance employee knowledge can take your workplace to the next level. It can also provide critical information like warnings or directions. And the key point of this is that you can put these visuals right at the point of need. I'm going to point out the label that's on that guard in the photo that we have on this slide. This is the type of information we're talking about. It's a reminder to the user right where the user is going to be using that piece of equipment. It's not on a wall near the equipment. It's right there, right on the equipment. Think of it this way. Workplace visuals give employees the knowledge they need to help create a leaner, safer, and a more productive facility. We're going to walk through a couple of statistics here, so bear with us. But we want to use these to emphasize how important workplace visuals can be. So think of this first one. 75% of knowledge is gained through visuals, so actually seeing something, as opposed to 13% through hearing and 12% through your other senses of smell, touch, and taste. Think of how your employees learn a task today. Are you just talking to an employee about what they need to do? That's the hearing portion of it. But with this statistic in mind, you'll want to reinforce all of that training with visual, something that they can see. And that combination of hearing something and then seeing it is stressing how important a point can be. I'm going to call up 2 different cliches that come to mind when I hear this, and seeing is believing, and a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that really helps reinforce this statistic. Another statistic is that the human brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text. how quickly does an employee spend looking at a sign? Often it can just be a glance. They don't have a lot of time to perhaps read a lot of text on a sign or a label, if they're reading anything at all. So reinforcing whatever they see with a visual is very important. And by visuals, I want to make sure that this is clear. I'm talking about like a graphic or a pictogram, something that helps reinforce the text that's on the sign. And when they're both used together, retention of that message is increased by 42%. So I call this the 1-2 punch. The graphic helps with that instant recognition, and then reading the text helps with the retention. So look at the example that's in the photo that's on this slide. Not only is there text to say that eye protection is required, but there's also a very simple graphic or visual to help reinforce that text. And that's where you're going to really increase your retention of the message for that sign. Now that we've covered exactly why visuals are essential for helping employees understand safety and processes, let's talk more about a visual workplace. A visual workplace is a lean concept where putting important information right where your employees need it. This plays a very critical role in one of the most popular lean tools, including 5S. A well-labeled stockroom, so play off the photo that's on here. If your stockroom is well-labeled, very simple example, you can decrease the time someone spends searching for an object. It's clearly marked. They can see exactly what it is that they need. It can also decrease the opportunity to grab the wrong item. It's clear they need part number, for example, 2050-A. It's clearly labeled. It's in that bin. You reduce that opportunity of grabbing the wrong item. It also takes the guesswork. Oh, is this what I need, or is the one next to it what I need? I'm not sure. So just a simple label on a bin like this can really improve the workplace and make it more efficient. Here's another statistic, and I promise this is probably, I think, the last one. There might be one more. Waste accounts for 95% of all costs in non-lean manufacturing environments. That's overwhelming. A well-labeled facility that communicates safety information or procedures or any type of general information that you want your employees to know helps to reduce waste. It enhances knowledge, and it improves the productivity of that facility. So Chris now is going to walk us through a simple example of a 5S activity that focused on safety and productivity in the workplace.
Hi, thanks, Lori. So as Lori indicated, that there's a focus on waste reduction. When you're in the lean world, everything's all about waste reduction. And in this particular example, it's a very small and simple example to illustrate, but you can see on the picture that there is some tooling on a toolbar, and there's some attempts to do some 5S activities here by putting the bins into a logical sequence by size. And also that you can't see by this, that the logical sequence was for the person that was refilling the bins, and they were by part number instead of by order of sequence. And by doing a simple 5S activity with a small group of people, the objective was to improve productivity with an eye towards some safety improvements. The thing that I want to point out from a safety perspective is that there was some prior incidents that had taken place in these assembly benches. You see the yellow triangle on the small manual press, and that triangle is a warning signal that a safety engineer had put onto the presses to designate that that's a potential safety problem where hands were being pinched into the arbor press. And the general message there was, be careful when you're operating the arbor press so that you don't pinch your hand. So that was the visual signal that was illustrated to the operators. So in the 5S activity, if we move to the next slide, the after analysis with an eye toward waste reduction, there was a significant reduction of number of tools on the magnetic bar. There was a shadow board of the tools that were put in sequence there. The observation of the operation was observed and very inconsistent from operator to operator and shift to shift, which is the reason why the arbor presses were not in a fixed position, because the operators had the ability to do the sequence of the assembly in a slightly different order. And that required the arbor presses to be moved in and out of the workspace. The movement of those arbor presses moving in and out of the workplace was not the objective of the 5S event. The objective of the 5S event was to improve productivity, which we achieved by reducing the overall assembly time from 19 to 20 minutes down to a 12-minute repetitive cycle. So not only did we reduce the variation of the assembly time, but we reduced the actual assembly time itself. Bringing it back to the safety perspective, we found out with the safety engineer that the arbor presses had actually caused a recordable incident about a year prior to this event where someone had to go in for stitches. And the observation really boiled down to, how could they have, hurt themselves with the hand in that arbor press when you have a hand on the part and a hand on the press during the operation. And really what it boiled down to is that they were moving the arbor presses around the workplace too much. So a very simple illustration of a simple 5S activity that set out to be a productivity improvement and ended up yielding some safety improvements along the way. So I'm not sure what the next slide is. Lori? Okay,
great. Thanks, Chris. Here's an example of a sign. It's quite simple. It says, floor is wet, be careful. You've probably seen a sign like this in a facility, perhaps your own. It's a handwritten sign. It was probably very quick and easy to put up. The good news is that there was some sort of notification that was put up in this facility to tell employees that the floor may be slippery. However, can everyone read that handwriting? That may be a concern. Some handwriting is better than others. Also, is the paper that the message is written on, how durable is that? We know the floor is wet. We don't know where this sign is, but is it surviving the environment in which it's hung? Also, I would question if the sign loses some sort of credibility because of the casual nature of it. Let's go to the next version. It's the same slide, or same message, actually, but a little better option here. We have a nice large caution header, very attention-getting. Anyone walking by it at a glance knows, oh, there's something I need to pay attention to here. It's very easy to read the text, and it's probably made on a more durable material that's going to survive any of the elements. Here's what we're calling the best option in this case. This sign takes it to the next level because of the addition of the graphic. Not only do you have the same text, that the floor is slippery when wet, but you have a graphic or a pictogram reinforcing the text that goes along with that. And as we talked earlier, that's going to help with the retention of this message. It's also utilizing the ANSI best practice standard where the text is all left justified. There's been a big study to show that left justified text is easier for us to read and comprehend than if all of the message is center justified. It also uses mixed case, so upper and lower case text is easier for us to read as opposed to all uppercase. And the last sign, I don't know if you noticed, but all the text was in uppercase. Mixed text is easier to read. It also has the caution header on it, but this label has all of the black text on a white background. So the contrast is greater, making it easier to read. And that's the whole intention of this. You want these signs to be easy to read very quickly, and understand their meaning very quickly. So that was just a quick example we wanted to run through. Next, we're going to talk about the power to address some of the challenges that we face. And think about your facility and the signage or the labels that you might have around your facility, or the signs or labels that you don't have in your facility. Are we starting to instill a sense of how maybe some of these could be improved around your environment? In this next section, we're going to talk about workplace safety and compliance, employee training and education, and productivity and quality improvements. Facility identification, like signage or labels around your facility, can help with the challenge of workplace safety and compliance. These types of visuals can alert workers of potential hazards that might exist in the area, and then guide them through the proper procedures to complete a task, complete that task safely and efficiently. The ultimate goal here for a visual is to provide the information that your employees need to do their job safely and then go home safely. A good visual tells an employee what he needs to know right at a glance. I'm going to talk through this photo because I think it's a very simple visual, I'll call it. It's a label that's applied to a gauge. We all have these gauges around our facility. But this label provides a lot of information at a very easy glance. Without this label, we've all seen these types of gauges. There's a number around the dial, and then there's a needle. And right now this needle is around 35 psi. And without that label, if you were to walk past that gauge and you saw that needle, would you as a casual walker by know that that equipment was operating at the proper level? Unless you really knew that equipment, you probably wouldn't know. But having this simple red and green label on this gauge clearly tells anybody, whether it's the operator of the equipment or anyone just walking by, whether that equipment is operating in the proper condition. If that needle's in the red area, there's probably something that's not right that needs to be addressed. So a simple label like this or any effective visual can inform a user what the next step is maybe in a procedure, tell a user whether equipment is running properly, or notify if there's perhaps a potential hazard. Here's another example that I want to talk through, and this photo is really bad, but I just want to talk through this a little bit. I was on a plant tour, and I was talking to the manager who was showing me around, and he was showing me the different types of signage that he had at his facility, and we came upon this example, and I said, well, clearly that top label says shut off at main panel. Nice that people are informed where the shut off is, but what does that bottom label say? It was all in Spanish. And he said, well, we have a very large Spanish-speaking employee base here, and we wanted them to be aware of that same information. And I said, that bottom label says the same thing as the top one? He said, well, I really have no idea what that bottom label says because I don't speak Spanish. Here's my point with this label is, with this example, is that it's important that all of the employees in a facility understand the meaning of a message. So whether you have English-speaking or Spanish-speaking employees, they all need to have the same message. And a simple sign like the one on the right where it's in both English and Spanish in this example is a clear way. Then you as the manager also know that your employees are getting the same message. To have signage in a facility that we're not really sure what it says is probably not best practice. Finally, we'll talk about the power to address the challenge of productivity and quality improvements. effective visuals around your facility can improve the productivity and quality of your facility. We've talked about that. Here's some examples. So the photo on the bottom, the replacement filter. This is a very simple label, but it clearly tells an employee what part number he needs to grab for that replacement filter. And then it also tells that employee where that replacement filter is stored. There's no time wasted trying to figure out what part do I need, did I grab the right part. The information is right there for the employee. The label on the top photo, that image, this visual clearly shows anyone, again, at a glance, as they're walking past this chain, is that chain in the proper position? If it's too tight or if there's too much slack, that chain would be in the red area, indicating that there was probably a problem that needs to be addressed. These types of issues that can be addressed before there's a problem can help prevent equipment failures, and that would also lead to a reduced workplace injury. I'm going to talk you through this example too. This was a visit that I had done to a small fire department, and the fire department consisted of all volunteers. So it was an all-volunteer fire department, and he used labels to mark all of the equipment on his truck. And he did that for many reasons, because when there's a fire, most of the time a lot of this equipment's coming off the truck, and then when the fire's done, they've put the fire out, all this equipment has to go back on the truck. So he not only marked the equipment, he marked on the truck what went where. And so it's very clear when everything had to go back onto the truck where it belonged. It also showed him what was missing. And he said he was saving a lot of money by not having to buy replacement axes or fire air packs that would get left behind. But now it's real clear with the truck, there's a label here, there's no equipment here, I'm missing something, let's look for it. But let's go to the next slide. I just want to show some of these photos that we have. The other thing that he did then, which I thought was really clever, is he has a fire, like I said, a volunteer fire department, and when there's a large fire, there will be fire departments from other communities that will come and assist with that fire. And you can imagine when you've got Fire Station A, Fire Station B, and Fire Station C, all their equipment is laying around after a fire, and now it comes time to put it away. Whose air pack is this? Whose fire extinguisher is this? Is this your axe or is this our axe? Everything was well labeled from this fire station's side. So he encouraged all the other fire departments in his community to do the same thing. But he said, I'm going to label my stuff with blue. You label your stuff with red. You label your stuff with yellow. So now all this equipment was laying on the ground, and they could say, this was ours, this is yours, this is Fire Station C's. And because it was a volunteer fire department, everyone went home a lot quicker, and that was the end game for this fire department. Chris, I think you have a couple of examples you'd like to share?
Yeah. So very similar to the last example, this particular small lean event, it was a basic 5S event, and it was really focused on improving productivity of this particular cell, number one, and the area had some safety concerns as well, specifically around slips, trips, and falls. So we were tasked to look in 5S a particular area to look at waste and waste reductions to improve productivity. That was the plant manager's number one priority. And then he said, hey, we're having a little bit of a concern around safety and slips, trips, and falls. Can you take a look at that? What we found out during the 5S event is that there was an uncovered ergonomic issue being observed that we were also able to get after during the particular 5S event. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide. This is a pretty busy slide, so I'll walk you through the example. In the upper left-hand corner, that was the current state as observed, and these are These are bales of absorbent booms coming off of a particular production line. And you can see that there was some flow interruptions. There was certainly some bottlenecking taking place. 2 operators working at the end of the line trying to get bales of products onto a particular skid. And the productivity solution was really to focus on flow and using a lean technique called standard work in process. And that standard work in process flow technique is illustrated in the upper right-hand corner. So at this point in time, all of the efforts were really focused on improving flow and productivity. During that particular analysis, we found out that we not only improved the productivity, but the operators were really thankful. And the reason why they were thankful is because we had taken 3 lifts out of their particular workflow. So they had one small tabletop bench, call it, where they were packaging these booms coming off the end of the line, and they were putting them into a bag. But in order to close the bag, they had to move it off of that table and then open up another bag to keep the line rolling. So then that just created this non-flowing scenario. And you can see that the operators then tried to take matters into their own hands and create some very basic lettering, labeling onto a particular workstation, organizing their tools in their workplaces. It seems pretty basic when you look at it on an after basis, but we did not set forward in this particular area to improve ergonomics, and that was the number one win out of the entire thing. Each one of those bales weighs about 50 pounds, I think 45 to 50 pounds, and one particular operator saved about 3,200 pounds in lifting throughout a particular day. So the next day, we had their vested interest just by focusing on some very simple 5S techniques. And the nice thing is, you'll see it in the next slide, but I want to talk to the lower pictures. The operators 3 weeks later had liked this improvement activity so much that they immediately deployed it into a similar line nearby, and just took that particular redesigned standard and then kind of ran with it. So bring it back more to the visual side. There was a lot of excess boxes in the area stored around the corner, filters, and just a variety of excess supplies underneath stairways, nooks, and crannies, and certainly no adherence to a 5S principle. So they were tasked to try to eliminate anything that was laying on the floor, and they came up with some creative solutions. In the lower right-hand corner, just a simple watermark visual container to say, hey, I'm below a watermark, I need more to be put in here. And that's all that was allowed to be on that particular shop floor area. So that was all done through a very simple 5S activity to bring some visuals around a given standard. If you can go ahead to the next slide. In this particular slide, this was really focused on reducing the clutter around the footsteps and the slips, trips, and falls piece of it. This is the same work area, and in the upper right-hand corner there was, just as I mentioned before, no real standards in place around which boxes are supposed to be here and not here. That was a lesson that got beat into me in my early lean tutelage. Basic 5S. Here, not here. Here, not here. And if I heard that once, I probably heard it 100 times. And if you can't quickly and efficiently understand if it's supposed to be there, you probably haven't achieved a level of 5S. And so it seems basic, it seems simple, but I would guarantee that the larger group of people on this audience participating probably can walk out to any shop floor, any work environment, and see some things similar. So ask yourself, here, not here, and then try to bring some physical standards in place, and then augment that with some of the tips that Lori was talking about in terms of the visual standards. Another tidbit that I want to point out here with the reduction of slips, trips, and falls opportunities is a simple 5S technique that's in use +1. And what do I mean by that? The In Use Plus One, in your lower right-hand corner, you'll see that this is a packaging station of boxes, very similar to the one that we reviewed in the prior slide. And there's 2 rolls of stretch wrap. The prior condition of those stretch wraps, that's after the bales and the boxes are put onto the skid, and they would manually stretch wrap those in place on the production line. And there was 6 or 7 boxes of stretch wrap in this production area because they never wanted to run out. So, just the In Use Plus One concept and making that a visual standard. So the one that they're using, when they ran out, hey, I can quickly replace that roll with the one that I need there and never lose my production time. During lunch breaks or with a team lead, they can always replace that empty spindle as it depleted. So just some very, very simple 5S techniques that draw attention on a visual standard. I think the important lesson here to summarize these 2 slides is just that we set out with the objective of one thing, and while we're doing that 5S activity, taking advantage of an ergonomic find and multiple 5S opportunities to reduce slips, trips, and falls. In this example here, very similar, we set out with the objective. This is a lean event that was more of an office lean event. This particular activity, the high-level objectives were to reduce the number of sales orders going on credit hold in order entry. And, if you're looking at that and you say, well, there can't possibly be any safety correlations to credit holds on an order entry. And by just applying simple lean activities, observing the process, what did we stumble into? We stumbled into the fact that we had returned merchandise. And this was an acquisition, and they had some ordering problems, and the RMA backlog was insurmountable. It was literally piles of products. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide? The upper left-hand corner was boxes that were returns from customers that needed to be processed, and this was really the root cause of sales orders going on credit hold because customers were expecting their credit to hit their account, and therefore they're not expecting to be on credit hold. And it caused a lot of transactional problems. Once again, applying some very simple 5S principles. What is the process? What are the inputs? What's the process steps? How do we make that visual? And how can we look at it and to know whether or not we are in tolerance, out of tolerance, what is the standard, and how can we quickly return that back to the standard? We had to create some visual cues. So we took that pile of RMAs and created it may be hard to read on those signs, but we created a work process storage area that had signs that said these are Monday's RMAs, and they go on the Monday shelf. So then by Wednesday they had a target that they wanted to have the prior day's activities depleted. They would be happy if they had 2 or 3 days in queue, but certainly not 500 to 600 boxes like their prior state. So very simple 5S principles. How does this relate back to safety? Again, we did not set out with the objective to improve safety in the returns warehouse operation, but certainly that was the ensuing action. So, always keeping an eye on safety, even when you're working in an office lean environment, was the takeaway here.
So 5S, we've probably all heard the term. We're probably most familiar about it, but it is a widely adopted lean manufacturing tool to help reduce waste and establish a framework to maintain and improve a workplace. And it does this by creating a clean and orderly environment.
So as Lori indicated, I've mentioned in 3 different examples applying some very basic 5S principles to it. And everyone has a lean story or a lean journey. And, part of my personal learnings, we actually took a little bit of a 5S detour and retooled all of our training documentation to be, we're now going to implement a 6S strategy. And I'm sure there's people on the call that have a 6S process versus a 5S process. During one of my learning sessions, with a very stern sensei, he made a statement to me that really made an impression. He said, safety is so important that it should never be watered down by 5S. 5S is 5S, and you should always be thinking about safety. And from that, we actually ripped apart our training documentation that we would use to train people in our operation, and then reverted back to a 5S standard, which is illustrated on the next slide. And the way that we go about teaching and training new individuals around 5S as a tool is, you have your standard 5S approach, but as you're going through each sequence of that approach, you're always keeping an eye on safety. And, hopefully with some very brief examples that we shared here today, we were able to, shed some light on, the correlations of while you're going through a 5S environment, how you can make things visual, and also keeping an eye on safety. We didn't take it and say 5S plus safety plus ergonomics, which we actually did think about. But I think everyone here can get the picture that you're not trying to do ergonomics alone. You're trying to do ergonomics in conjunction with the work processes taking place. The same thing holds true with safety. So hence the term 5S plus safety. It does stand on its own, but it is integral into the 5S process.
So we think the key here is to not think about safety when it's too late, after everything's been changed and modified. It shouldn't be a surprise when you're done with an event and look, safety was improved too. It's an opportunity to be involved throughout the whole process and to ask at every step, how can we improve safety? How will safety be improved as you're making improvements to the 5S as we're more traditionally used to, reducing the non-value-added activities and improving the other elements that a 5S program gives you. So we hope it's become a little more clear on how a 5S plus program can help safety and efficiency in your facility. Let's talk a little bit about how we're going to get there. We spent some time talking a little bit about best practices, but just want to touch on a couple of these. I think they're important that they bear repeating. When you're working toward a 5S plus program, consider the importance of the effective best practice visuals. First one I would like to point out is that you should avoid putting too much information on one visual. The visual should be easy to see and comprehend for your entire workforce. So utilizing things like symbols or graphics or pictograms to help reinforce the text message that might be on your sign. You want these to be understood by any employee at a simple glance. They shouldn't have to stop and read and try to understand what the message is saying. It's also important to keep your signage up to date with any changes in your equipment or your process or your workplace hazards. Things change all the time in a facility. Make sure the visuals and signage around your facility stay up to date as well. Also, we recommend that you avoid putting up unnecessary signs or labels that can add to confusion or mixed messages. One time I was at a facility and I was talking to one of the managers walking around, and we were stopped at a workstation, and there was an employee's large tool chest there, and he had like a wear your hard hat label on his tool chest. And I said, are we supposed to be wearing hard hats in this area? And he said, nah, that guy just has that label on his tool chest. That's nothing. Well, how do people know that? And then how do they know to take the next safety sign that they see in their facility seriously? So avoid that unnecessary signs or labels that add to that confusion. And we also recommend that you follow the 2011 ANSI Z535 safety sign standard as a best practice, and follow the consistent color standards for both signs and floor marking. Chris, you want to touch on what that is?
Sure. In the color as an important tool or an important standard in your 5S activities, learning this by the School of Hard Knocks, I guess, is what this slide is all about. So, as I mentioned before, everyone has their lean story, their lean journey story, and lots of things posted, lots of story sharing. And I would say early in our lean journeys, when we were attempting 5S practices, we would grab vinyl tapes, we would grab floor marking tapes, we would grab signs, and we would improve our existing standards. And very quickly, my favorite lean tool became the tape scraper. So that's kind of a bad joke, but it's very true. The tape scraper was part of our kit. It was part of our 5S kit because we had to routinely scrape up tape that had been misapplied or applied down, and then we changed where things needed to be. But we also then found out that we had kind of a potpourri of colors on the shop floor, and you use what was readily available to achieve a level of standard. So if we had to do it all over again, which we do now when we go into different plants and different areas, by applying some color standards to the types of things. If it's raw material, we use a certain color. If it's tooling, we use a certain color. If it's to mark out an area for access panel, we use a certain color. And then once we created this standard, or I should say stole it shamelessly from a person internally that worked for another company, we just adapted that, and that became our internal standard that now we've shared with other people as they're asking for that in terms of a best practice. So, that is a real life story, and the importance of color standards in floor marking or signage or backgrounds or tooling or fixture has really aided in terms of the here, not here journey.
Great. So first thing you have to do is get started. This is often one of the hardest things to do, is just start. So some of the things that we recommend here is that maybe you select one area of your facility that needs improvement. Maybe it's an area where there's been recent injury or numerous injuries that you'd like to reduce that. So identify that need. What is that? What needs to be done? What can be improved? Get the necessary supplies, and make sure you include visuals in your improvement to that area. Remember all the things we talked about reinforcing training or the message, that step that might always get overlooked. You want these visuals to help guide the user to be more effective and safe. And remember to take before and after photos. Those always help you remember where you've come from and where you have ended up. When it comes to getting and obtaining visuals for your facility, we know that you have options for that, and we just want to touch on these for a little bit. All of these different options come with their own sets of pros and cons. A couple that come to mind is that you can purchase stock or custom signs or labels from a manufacturer through their catalogs or their websites, or you can make them yourself. Oftentimes when you are buying pre-made signage, you have to either settle for a stock message, and I say settle because sometimes they're more generic. They're not specific to your facility. They're not specific exactly to the need that you're trying to get across, but they're readily available. Or you can go with custom pre-made signage, and one of the things that happen with that is you certainly get the message that you need. It says exactly what you want it to say, but often you pay a price premium for something custom, or you have to deal with large minimum order quantities. Maybe you don't need 25 signs or whatever it is. Another option is to make your visuals yourself, and industrial label makers are an option which allow you to have your message say exactly what you want it to say. Oftentimes these are available on durable materials, so it's going to survive in an environment that is that your workplace might throw at it. And you also have the ability to add graphics, so reinforcing the text with the graphic to improve the retention of that. And you don't have to deal with minimum order quantities. You're only going to make what you need. So visuals are key to a leaner, safer, and more productive workplace. The key here is to equip your employees with the knowledge that they need at a glance. This will ultimately lead to a leaner, more productive, and a safer workplace. So I believe we're going to take some questions.
All right, great. Thank you both for that insightful presentation. Before we start the Q&A, I wanted to remind everybody about the evaluation survey we're asking you to complete. The survey should be appearing on your screen, and we ask that you consider completing it to let us know your thoughts. Your input is important as it directly helps improve future webcasts. So please do take the time to fill out the survey. If you don't see the evaluation survey on your screen, please turn off your pop-up blocker. Okay, let's get to some of the questions. First question we have in here is, how can someone use the lean team to incorporate safety into their efforts?
You want me to take that?
Yep.
How can someone take the lean team and incorporate that into safety into their efforts is the question?
Yes.
Boy, I'd almost, for this particular question, I'd almost turn that upside down. Anyone can be thinking about 5S activities. Just from a user's perspective, we used to go out and do 5S activities from a lean management perspective, go out and then ask for some approval. It's almost like going out to dad and saying, "Hey, look at what I did," and then being sent back to the drawing board to kind of redo or look for that approval. And we really have gained some wind where the safety engineer or the safety manager or even the production manager, anybody in a particular role, has the ability to do a 5S activity as long as they keep, the balance of productivity and the process and the standard of the activity in mind to make it a better workplace. So, no need to, sit back and delegate that to the lean team. I would say anybody in safety is equal game, is fair game to, roll up their sleeves and perform the same style of 5S activity with a workforce. So I wouldn't sit back and wait.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. In the example that targeted a reduction of tripping hazards, do you know what the resultant reduction of incidences or incident rate was? Was it something that was sustainable?
Let's see. So the example of the tripping hazards, we had two examples of that. I'm going to assume that was referring to the booms, the boom room. So in that particular example, there were actually no incidents that we were trying to reduce. It was the internal plant observation where they had an observation program, kind of a conditions program. And the informal, the formula that a lot of people would look at is that unsafe conditions plus unsafe behaviors equal an incident. An unsafe condition by itself won't necessarily yield an incident, or an unsafe behavior doesn't necessarily cause an incident. It's really the presence of both the condition and the behavior together yielding that incident. And the plant manager had been really getting fed up with just too many unsafe conditions that could potentially cause that incident. So we basically put a war on slips, trips, and falls opportunities to reduce conditions. So there wasn't a yielded result of incidents, but certainly a yielded result in those conditions that are part of the incident creation. So that's how I would answer that.
Okay, great. Thank you. You described evaluating the process for safety when doing 5S. Why is this not done during the design for manufacture and product development?
I would say the reality is it should be. This presentation here was really looking at existing circumstances and going to the Gemba and watching what was taking place with an eye toward 5S and standardization and improvement. Certainly you have that same opportunity, and I would encourage anybody to bring that same level of energy to that design for manufacturability and product development. So no reason why you wouldn't do that.
Okay, great. We had a question here. We've had a couple questions actually come in about manager skill sets and so forth. What kind of manager skill set is needed for this process?
We talked a lot about waste observation during this process, and waste has a variety of different meanings to different people. So anybody that's been in the lean world for a while, an open-ended question you could ask just about anybody is, what's your definition of waste? And it's very telling what people would look at. They'll say, well, it's the product waste, it's the offcut, it's the trim, it's the flashings, it's the physical product, or it's the stuff they throw away. And that is really not what we're talking about. We're talking about a structured approach toward waste observation. If anybody wants to Google, there's a ton of information out there about lean forms of waste. I think I've seen the 7 forms of waste, which are the common ones. I've seen 8 forms of waste, which incorporates the human waste factor. 9 forms of waste that incorporates reduction of variation. And I think there's presentations out there that go all the way up to 12 and 13 forms of waste. That is a skill set that I would say is a requirement to be able to train yourself to look and observe toward the structured waste identification. And I would just start with the 7 forms of waste in terms of observation. And the acronym that is used a lot of times is downtime. So if you were to look at downtime, defects, employee, transportation, movement, inventory, those are, to name a few, taking a structured look at waste and then incorporating, as you're reducing waste, incorporate safety improvements into that. So that would be a unique skill set that not everybody has, but can be learned very easily.
But Chris, I've also heard you use the term journey a couple of times. Wouldn't you agree that if you don't get it right 100% or identify all the waste up front, you can keep doing this? Absolutely.
I mean, the journey, the continuous improvement mindset, too often we have a tendency to shoot for the home run during these processes. I mean, you saw the rapid improvements. A good example, Lori, is that box, that clear box that had the filters in it. 3 weeks later, they came up with a better mousetrap. They had basically scrapped that and then came up with a different solution for it. But it was achieving a level of improvement that was better than where they were at with an eye toward waste. So that's a management skill set with waste, but also I would say a management discipline to shoot for that continuous improvement. Maybe that's where you were going with your point. So I think we butchered that one.
No, I think that was very well said. We're at the time of the year now where I don't know about everyone listening in, but it's getting warmer out, and we're getting that kind of an itch to do some spring cleaning. Maybe some of us are feeling that. We have a question in here about a facility that's planning a one-day housekeeping cleanup at their plant. They're going to shut down production, and they're just going to spend the day kind of cleaning up and putting things in order. What recommendations would you have for them on maintaining that after this one-day event?
All right, so I'm going to answer that twofold. So I've been part of plant cleanups. I've been part of activities that have gone well, and then they haven't been sustained. So I'm going to answer it two ways. Number one, you can always put in an auditing activity in place and audit your way to greatness. And I've been part of operations that love to do 5S audits, segment your facilities, put those audits in place. The failure with audits, typically they're too detailed instead of trying to keep it a higher level. So you can audit if you're not the auditing kind of organization and you don't think that that's a sustainable approach. Then during that cleanup process, I would really advise that when you're going through and you're going through that red tag process and you have a red tag area to hold things, put some rules and structure in place around how long things can be in there. Who do I contact if that particular product wants to be brought out into production again? So those are good tips during that process. So red tagging items definitely during your cleanup is advisable. The other tip that I would throw out there is really engage the operators in that particular work area and ask them, what are the steps in the process and what do you need in order to achieve success? And by asking those questions and challenging that routinely, you're able to really figure out what is needed and what is not needed. And when you find the things that are needed, use some of the tips that Lori went through. Use some of these tips of, in use +1. Use your visual standards. Use the replenishment. How does that particular item get replenished, or where does it go when it's stored? Very simple practices. Where it goes wrong, frankly, is when you do a facility cleanup and you're just doing spring cleaning and throwing things out without any thought of what do I need in accordance to the process. So housekeeping absolutely has to take place. While you're doing that, challenge your housekeeping staff to think about steps of the process, and in those steps of the process, what do I need and what do I not need, and where does it go when I need it, and where does it go when I need it to be stored. If you follow that guiding rule for everybody as part of your housekeeping process, you'll achieve a more sustainable activity.
And probably if you go back and it's needs house cleaning again, maybe you weren't looking at the process properly.
Yeah.
Why is this still sitting out? Why can't it be put away? Things like that. Just relook at it.
Right. Housekeeping. Am I allowed for my bad lean joke at this point in time?
Sure.
All right. So another bad lean joke at this point in time is when people set forward and do a housekeeping event and they're calling that a 5S event, the bad joke is really that's a half S. So you can take the half-S approach and do the housekeeping, or you can do it all the way through. So that's your entertainment for the day.
Okay. Well, I think we have time for just one more quick question here. Is there a structured approach to process improvement?
Wow. That is
I'm not sure if you can answer that quickly or not.
I don't think anybody can answer that quickly, but I would say this. There's multiple examples toward process improvements. Typically mean that you're trying to solve a problem. All right, and there are, when you boil it down, problem solving is there's only 3 reasons why you have a problem. 1, I didn't have a standard. 2, I have a standard and I didn't follow the standard. And 3, my standard's not capable of meeting my objectives. So when you're talking about process improvements, in many cases, ask yourself, where are you in that three-level tier? Do I have a standard and is it understood? And if not, create the process and deploy that process. If you have a standard and I don't understand why people are not doing this, so on and so forth, there's usually good reasons. And then you want to get after those process improvements that allow people to achieve that standardization. And then the third one is really, if I'm doing everything I've been told, I'm doing it exactly the way that the standard does, but I'm still not hitting my objectives, well, then you need a new process design because it's the definition of insanity at that point in time. So that would be the quickest way that I could answer that question.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Chris. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I apologize. There were a lot of questions that came in that we didn't get an opportunity to answer, but as a reminder, all of the unanswered questions from today will be forwarded on to our speakers. Once again, I hope you take the time to answer the evaluation survey on your screen. We appreciate getting all the feedback you may have for us. And with that ends today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. I'd like to thank Chris, Lori, Brady, and all of you who listened in. Thank you, and have a great day.